Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Targabright. Billinger. Blasey. Blue. Bowers. Bowser. Clays from Saline. Clays from Sedgwick. Clifford. Corson. Dietrich. Erickson. Fagg. Fascudo. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holscher. Klemp. Cluse. Masterson. Murphy. Owens. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Rose. Reichman. Schmidt. Schallenberger. Shane. Starnes. Sykes. Thomas. Thompson. Titus. Tyson. Ware. Warren.
Senators and guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our guest chaplain, Doug Hinkle.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, it's a blessing to understand that you know each of us intimately, that you are cognizant of every detail of our lives. As this body has come together from across our state for this legislative session, the focus of senators and staff turns from matters of personal business, home, family, and hometown relationships to relationships within this building and to issues of significance for our entire state. Yet, the concerns and joys of life outside of this building remain. I pray that concerns could be shared with colleagues here and that the burden would be lightened by an encouraging word, a prayer together, or a heartfelt embrace. And Father, I ask that the joys from home would be shared as well and found to be a blessing and encouragement. Please give each senator here the wisdom and grace to find the peaceful balance between legislative duties and responsibilities and being the spouse, the parent, the friend or colleague you've called them to be. Jesus, cause a common bond of service to our state to draw us together despite political differences and contrasting legislative approaches to issues of the day. Keep us from quarrels and angry disputes, injuring otherwise friendly relations. Before we speak, remind us that our words have consequences, that death words destroy, hurt, and create humiliating feelings, but life words build and increase strength of character. Cause us, as your word admonishes us to do, to speak the truth in love. Lord, I lift up each member here to you today. Bless them with your wisdom, your grace, and your peace. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a point of personal privilege, Chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome in the gallery, we have many of our friends from the local pharmacies. Thank you for joining us today and all your work.
For page introductions, Chair recognizes the senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 pages here today with me. I have Corbin Creven, Arab Verma, I hope I'm pronouncing your last names right, and we have Pranitha Baba. They are 6th graders from Auburn Elementary and Indian Hills Elementary, and they have spent the day. They went up to the dome. They enjoyed it. So thank you so much for being in the Senate. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from Lyon, Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the pleasure of introducing 5 students from Olpe High School in Lyon County. Caleb Steffes, if you'd stand. His grandfather served in the House for many years. Jesse Kuhlman, James Kimberlin, Braden Linneman, and Eli Markowitz. Welcome to the chamber.
Senator from Barton, Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 6 pages from Ellsworth. They got up really early and came up this morning. So as I state your name, I have them behind me and over here. I have Ruby Cannon, I have Cora Kyler, Adriana Newman, Mallory Procheska, Owen Schultz, and Reagan Williams. So welcome to the Senate. Thank you.
Welcome to the Kansas Senate. Thank you for helping us out today.
Mr. President.
Right, please note references of bills on page 1 through 5 of the calendar. Oh, did you have some senator from Finney, Senator Clifford?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 guests in the gallery I'd like to point out. If I could have your...
You may have a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, sir. In the gallery here to over my right shoulder, we have Gina Onlecker, a realtor from Garden City, Finney County Commissioner Vicki Gurman, and District Court candidate Laura Boers. If anyone knows the governor, I'd appreciate a plug for Laura. Thank you, ladies.
Since this is a new term, when you do have point of privilege, and this is not an admonishment, Senator Clifford, just please come back and talk to Corey so we can get it into the script. Thank you. Introduction of original motions and Senate resolutions. Clerk will read.
Senate Resolution number 1708 by Senators Sykes and others. A resolution designating February 5th, 2025 as Early Childhood Advocacy Day and recognizing the need to invest in the future success of Kansas by supporting the well-being and education of our youngest residents, as well as the parents and the adults who care for them.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
I would ask the reader to read.
Whereas 90% of a child's brain develops before the child enters kindergarten, and whereas meaningful investments in the first 5 years of a child's life are essential to healthy brain development and sustainable success of Kansas children, and whereas research clearly shows that a child's experience from birth to age 5 determines the trajectory of such child's entire life, from social and environmental development to academic achievements and career success. And whereas parents are a child's first teachers and they play a crucial role in ensuring healthy development throughout their developmental stages. And whereas exposure to positive factors, especially stable and responsive relationships with parents, child care providers, and early childhood educators and other caring adults promote overall development. And whereas investing in a strong foundation helps children develop the skills they need to become independent adults who thrive and contribute to their communities. And whereas the return on our investment in child care, early childhood home visitation, healthcare, and education stands out as a particularly unique benefit to our state, which will ultimately save taxpayer dollars and other programs later in life. And whereas access to a high-quality, safe, affordable child care and early childhood educational opportunities is critical for Kansas children to succeed and our state's economy to grow and prosper. And whereas children born today will be the citizens and leaders in the decades ahead, and whereas investing in our future leaders now will determine Kansas' trajectory for generations to come, now therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the state of Kansas that we designate February 5th, 2025 as Early Childhood Advocacy Day, and be it further resolved that we recognize the need to invest in the future success of our state by supporting the well-being and education of our youngest residents, as well as the parents and adults who care for them, and be it further resolved that our ongoing investment in early childhood services and high-quality, affordable, and licensed child care is an investment in the current and future economic strength of our great state.
Senator from Johnson.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of my Senate colleagues who signed on to this resolution. I was recently reminded of an inspiring fact. By the time we finish this legislative biennium, nearly 70,000 babies have been born in Kansas. Those littlest Kansans will be in the midst of the most important period of development in their lives. This is a unique time in which the brain is being wired at an astonishing rate of nearly 1 million new neural connections per second. Widely accepted findings from decades of brain science research provide compelling evidence that relationships with their caregivers, experience in early life, and environmental exposure significantly influences the well-being of children. The brains we develop as young children are the same brains that we take with us into adulthood. What happens to us as children has consequences for physical and mental health, future relationships, and our ability to work and engage in our communities. These facts guide the work of thousands of child care providers, home visitors, healthcare providers, parents, and other early childhood professionals who care for Kansas children. And today, we had nearly 200 of them in the State House for the Early Childhood Advocacy Day. In the chamber today, and as I read your name, if you will stand, Jen Pishney from Kansas Child Care Training Opportunities. Annelle Harmon, I'm not sure if, oh, she made it, okay. From Harmon & Harmon Family Child Care. Angie Carnes, Child Care Providers Coalition of Kansas. Hillary Kane, Kansas Parents as Teachers. Heather Schrattenberger, Kansas Head Start Association. Gail Kozad, Kansas Children's Service League. Paula Neff, the Family Conservancy. Christy Smith, Child Care Aware of Kansas. And Tanya Bullock, Child Start. All are members of the Partnership of Early Success, which is a coalition of early childhood organizations, local chambers of commerce, and other advocates who are working to strengthen their early childhood system in Kansas. So they are here to make sure that we understand how important it is to invest in young children and to invest in those child care providers, to invest in evidence-based home visiting programs, and to invest in parents. And they hope that you will feel their passion for the work that they do every day, despite those low wages and long hours. So many of you had the opportunity to meet with these advocates one-on-one today, but in case you didn't, they wanted me to remind you some of the simple facts about the science of early childhood development. Just like a house, our brains require a strong foundation and wiring to support all future development and learning. Genes and life experiences shape the wiring of the brain, which means there isn't a question anymore of whether it's nature versus nurture. It's both. Responsive, caring, and supportive relationships between a child and her caregivers are essential to building a strong brain. Sturdy brain architecture and support from caring adults leads to the development of executive function skills. And those executive function skills help us prioritize, juggle, multiple tasks, organize, and focus. These skills, as well as the ability to self-regulate, are critical to healthy development well into young adulthood. Excessive stress and the lack of positive relationships can derail that healthy development. If a child does not have a safe, stable, and supportive caregivers and environments, then that stress response can be a long-lasting and extreme. We call this toxic stress, because it damages the developing brain and can have lifelong consequences. So please keep those simple truths in mind as we go on our work in the legislature, regardless of the committee that you're on. We know that these decisions impact young Kansas because so many factors contribute to their development. So whether you're on transportation, agriculture, tax, appropriations, insurance, health, all of it matters to children. So as I close, please join me in thanking these early childhood professionals in the gallery and in the building and around the state who cannot be here today. Their work is essential to creating the state where children can grow healthy and thrive. Sorry, I had to get all of them in because not everyone was able to be with us today. But I move that an emergency be declared, the rules suspended, and Senate Resolution 1708 be adopted by voice vote.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. It's like trying to psych us out over there, right? Hey, We're honored to have you here. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the Senate. Messages from the House. Clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2048. House Bill 2048, an act concerning insurance.
We're actually now ready for final action on the two bills from yesterday, but we're going to pause just a second, allow for some pictures. All right, on this roll call, we will take the following. The bills on page 6 and 7, Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 6. Clerk will read the titles.
Senate Bill 4, an act concerning elections. And Senate Bill 6, an act concerning elections.
Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Argabright. Billinger. Blasey. Blue. Bowers. Bowser. Clays from Saline. Clays from Sedgwick. Clifford. Corson. Dietrich. Erickson. Fagg. Fascudo. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holscher. Klemp. Cluse. Masterson.
Aye.
Murphy. Owens. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Rose. Reichman. Schmidt. Schallenberger. Shane. Starnes. Sykes. Thomas. Thompson. Titus. Tyson. Ware. Warren.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just not a brief explanation, but just affirmation of the no on Senate Bill 4. I was in this body as you were, Mr. President, at the time when unanimously we voted to allow that extension, knowing that the Postal Service needs more time to count every legally cast vote. It's postmarked by the same deadline. It's amazing to me that we would reverse that trend when we want to see every vote simply counted. I don't understand the theory behind it, honestly, to change it. We want to see every legally cast vote counted in our democracy, and I vote against changing that policy, which allows every vote to count in time for the post office to simply get it to our election commissioners and our county clerks. I don't get it, don't understand what, from all the debate yesterday, would cause this body, this legislature to change, and I hope that we will find a way to extend our understanding and our democracy for people to vote. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Explanation of vote, please.
Yes.
This explanation of vote is for Senate Bill 4. I vote no on Senate Bill 4. I've heard this bill or a version of it 3 or 4 times in as many years. The 3-day grace period has strong bipartisan support among voters, and it was implemented with overwhelming bipartisan support in this legislature. While there may be shortcomings in terms of mail processing and delivery, this bill does nothing to address those issues. Rather, this bill would punish Kansas voters for those problems. Had this bill been in effect in 2024, the state of Kansas would have thrown out 2,110 votes due to no other reason than slower mail processing times. It's important to ensure elections are free and fair. This bill does neither. Instead, it would force our election officials to throw out Kansans' duly cast votes.
Further explanation. Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. With her permission, I'd like to sign on to the explanation of vote from the Senator from Johnson.
So ordered. Further explanation. Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Frasquito.
Mr. President, I too would like to join the remarks of the gentlelady from Johnson, Senator Cindy Holscher.
So ordered. Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to join the remarks of the Senator from Johnson as well.
So ordered. Further explanation. Any changes? Seeing none, clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. (29) having voted in favor and 10 opposed to the passage of Senate Bill 6 and Senate Bill 4. These measures having reached their constitutional majority are hereby declared passed. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Chair appoints the Senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 14. The chair recognizes the Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, to explain the bill and stand for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senate Bill 14 is actually a fairly simple bill, although it's a big implication, and you could rename it the anti-government shutdown bill. It's a continuing appropriation. When I have been in this building in many years, and we've even run into June at times, right? And we got to the point that we were having confrontation with the governor's office, and we were at the threat of closing government office, not paying state employees. And this bill simply makes the allowance for, if we get into that kind of position, that the prior underlying the underlying budget for the current year you would be in at the time to carry forward. And I would stand for questions.
Questions? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have questions for the Senate President, if he would stand for them.
He's standing.
So we have worked during the interim and for the first few weeks of this session on some changes to our budgeting process. How does this fit with what we've seen thus far? And I guess one concern would be that we had a opportunity during the interim to look over the budget from last year and discuss changes, and then ended up with a motion simply to start from where we were last year and not make any additions to that weren't already part of the ongoing process. So how does this fit into that budgeting process?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill would not affect at all the budgeting process. So whether we do a legislature's budget or we went old school back to the governor's budget, it doesn't affect the budgeting process at all. We're talking about when you have a loggerhead at the end, right? You can't get you get the governor vetoing it for whatever reason. By the way, this is not something against the Democrat governor, Republican governor. No governor should be able to shut down the government by simply stroking a veto on the budget. So this gives us the allowance. And by the way, it creates enough pain that it does incentivize us to come to a conclusion and come to an agreement. So it really doesn't affect the budgeting process at all. And really the change on the legislative budget was for the purposes of coming back into the constraints of our own Constitution, right? The one constitutional responsibility that this body has is a budget. And so we were constrained by this. The other thing the Constitution says is we shall get our job done in 90 days. And we had blown that out of the water for so long, I can't find anybody that can remember the last time we did that. So both of those, the legislative process on the budget is tied into the 90 days, but it's not affecting this bill at all.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another question for the senator from Butler. What years is the legislature constrained by the 90-day limit?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
So the reading of the Constitution has been, in the Constitution it refers to even years. So on an even year, then you're constrained by the Constitution to 90, so which is another great point. The original framers of the Constitution contemplated us being in every other year legislature. We're not even authorized necessarily by the Constitution. We've just taken up that ourselves over the last many, many decades. So, but the hard stop of the Constitution is in the even year, and that's what our typical adjournment resolution. It had gotten so routine, even the leaderships in our own chambers didn't understand what that resolution did. They thought you passed an adjournment resolution to adjourn. What that resolution did by voice was say, notwithstanding our Constitution, we're going to keep going.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding had been that the legislature wanted to limit the number of days during an election year so that those legislators who were at the Capitol had an opportunity during that election year to be back in their community and talking with their constituents. And it would be interesting to find out more information about why that is there. But this year is a year when we do not have a constraint in terms of 90 days. This year is a year that I think we were promised a deep dive into the budget process, and I'm not sure that our time frame allows for that. If we were to take this road to just have the budget from the year before, could we do that more than 1 year in a row?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, would you respond?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Under this bill, you could, although that would be foolish, right? As you move forward, there's an incentive to fix things. And by the way, by the time we come back in the following January, you're only 6 months because of our fiscal year into the new year with plenty of time to make any adjustments to the budget. And I would even note, thank you to the Senator from Douglas for pointing out that this particular year, There is no constitutional restraint. We need to restrain ourselves. If you run this thing into June, it's more imperative that we have this in place so we don't shut down government.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am very concerned that this could be used not just for this coming year, but for an untold number of years into the future. I think that our responsibility is to work on a budget, is to pass that budget, and I think we owe it to our constituents to get that job done and not give ourselves a way out. Thank you.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, do you wish to respond? Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question for the carrier of the bill.
He's standing.
I noticed as I was looking at the bill, what impact does this have if it appears that this bill could affect accounts where federal funding, if federal funding ends, how are those accounts impacted?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for the Senator from Wyandotte. That is something I didn't touch on in the general explanation, but if you're rolling forward, and probably the best example would be like, because it really affects like federal funds coming in and timing, or like the tobacco settlement, for example. We have a tobacco settlement that goes to the Key Fund. The Key Fund predominantly funds the Children's Initiative Fund, and that fund has spending responsibilities that would have been appropriated for early childhood example. And so because of that timing, if you roll forward, it's a cash flow mechanism to allow for idle funds to be moved in there, and then when the Key Fund, for example, would be funded by the settlement, it would pay back. So it's an internal thing for cash flow.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Yes, just as a follow-up of that, I hear you're saying about cash flow, but it appears in the explanation that those funds those programs could then be terminated because the Secretary of Administration would have that power to make that decision, not this elected body, but the Secretary of Administration. Is that correct?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
It would allow for the Secretary of Administration, if there are no funds or no program, to make that determination.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
That seems to me to remove the authority that we have as elected officials to be making those determinations. My next question concerns if there's an account and the Secretary of Administration can then determine that it's no longer necessary to have that account in place, because now we, instead of having the legislature make the decisions, it's putting a lot of responsibility on the Secretary of Administration. Would this be true?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's not particularly unique, because if there was a fund that had no federal dollars, for example, we have funds in place that maybe the federal program ended, and so nothing funds that fund. So the Secretary of Administration has that authority not to have that fund anyway. There's no significant changes in that from that perspective, but it is giving them the flexibility, which would be necessary if you're in a battle with the governor. I mean, and by the way, that's the governor's administration would have the ability to make that determination. It really doesn't, you don't want a situation in which you can be comfortable not passing a budget for more than 1 year. And so you need to have that in place.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
And how does this impact when we have certain financial obligations, like with human services? Whereas this now is a rolling budget, would be from last year's budget, but yet those social service obligations continue to grow, and we have a responsibility to take care of that. Is this a constitutional violation?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The simple answer to that is no, it is not a constitutional violation, and even our own revisers have determined that basically this bill would create the specific appropriation, which was the prior year's bill. And so, and that's the whole cash flow purpose, right, as you're moving into that. And again, I'll repeat, we come back within 6 months of the fiscal year. If we have caseloads, for example, that's more incentive to get the agreement in the next session. It truly is just a stop a government shutdown bill. We would be required to fix that issue.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
I believe even though it is referred to as a rather simple bill, I think this bill raises a lot of concerns. It's a solution looking for a problem. We have been responsible legislature, and I believe we will continue, and I do not see the need to project that that would not happen in the future. So I am a no.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, you wish to respond? Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a question, if you would stand.
Go ahead.
So how can a budget that was approved by both chambers and then approved by the governor be extended without the approval of both chambers and the governor? I mean, it seems to me we're abdicating our responsibility if this goes into place.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This statutory change would be the authorization by the legislature and the governor or an override to appropriate.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. And I could see that for this body, but in 2 years, we will see a change. So we are tying the hands of future legislators for that. But my other question is, what does this do to our school funding formula? So it would go to the previous year, but we also have in statute that CPI increase. Can you talk about how that would be impacted by this?
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And that is a good question, and it would not affect because the school's formula is in statute currently, and currently the CPI is in statute. It would have been in the prior year's bill, so it would continue to appropriate.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. I still am struggling with some of the weeds of the legislation, and I think we are going to be in a violation of the separation of powers to expend those funds without approval of the full legislature and the governor. And then, if the governor vetoed something, by that argument, the governor didn't approve it. But again, I think while I understand the intent of this, I think there are a lot of consequences. We are tying the hands of future legislators, and I think this is going to cause more problems, and it's a solution in search for a problem. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson, do you wish to respond? Okay. Are there any other questions for the carrier of the bill? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple quick cleanups. This really is about protecting your constituents from a government shutdown, and thank you for doing that. We can't hamstring a future legislature. That's impossible. For example, this is a statute, right? Next year, next term, that legislature could decide to remove it. Right? You can't hamstring. And as far as the governor not approving, I think we're going to experience that a few times this session. That's what a veto override's about. Even if we were trying to get if she vetoed the whole budget or whoever the next governor's vetoed, the legislature override it, that'd be a budget without a governor's signature. It really changes none of that. It really is that simple. This is a protect your constituents from a government shutdown bill, and I'd ask when the committee rise and report Senate Bill 14 favorable for passage.
Body, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Body, we will now turn our attention to SCR 1603. The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, to explain the resolution and adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. SCR 1603 is a constitutional amendment that would create a variable on taxable limits. It would limit the taxable valuation increases to 3% or less each year, whichever one is lower. The committee made a couple of changes to this. The original legislation had transferability. We just didn't define whether it went with the property or with the owner. And the committee ran an amendment and it passed to make it transferable with the property when purchased. It also allows, this legislation allows for some flexibility since it is a constitutional amendment. We watched what happened in Florida. They have currently the 3% or less, or the CPI index, whichever's lower, and they've decided they don't like that 3% limit. So there is some flexibility for statute and also flexibility for defining transferability. With that, I'd stand for questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Questions of the carrier of the bill? Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment.
Have you turned it in?
Yes, I have.
You have a number?
RS 1158, or yeah, it's SCR 1603, RS 1158.
While the amendment's being passed out, do you want the reader to read it or do you want to explain it?
If the reader would read.
Reader to read? The reader may read.
Mr. President, I move to amend SCR 1603 as amended by Senate Committee on page 2 in line 25 after the period by inserting, quote, "For tax year 2026, the final taxable appraised value of such property shall not increase by more than 3%, or a lesser percentage as provided by law, as compared to the tax year 2022 appraised value of such property, unless an exception applies," end quote. On page 5, in line 7, after the period by inserting, quote, "The amendment would also roll back the valuation starting point to provide that for tax year 2026, the final taxable appraised value of such property shall not increase by more than 3%, or a lesser percentage as provided by law, as compared to the tax year 2022 appraised value of such property, unless an exception applies," end quote.
Senator Cali, Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, that's a tongue twister. Would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do a little bit more explaining on your amendment and stand for questions?
Yes, we will. This amendment simply changes the date of the taxable appraised value that's in the bill to the tax year of 2022. And the reason, Madam Chair, is the appraised value of, I'm going to use my property, I don't know what everybody else is, but I looked on the information that good Senator had passed out in caucus, and the increases in the last 2 years on the property she used as an example went up about 24%. Mine went up 21%. So the reason is the appraised value in the year 2025 is the highest valuation in the 20 years that I have lived in Cali County. And so I think that what we should do is limit that to the taxable valuation at the end of the year 2022. And then the 3% max increase would be figured from the taxable valuation that is in 2022 and going forward. In lieu of using a valuation that was, this increase that we've had in the last 2 years is not normal. And again, 20%, over 20% in 2 years is not normal. That's the reason we have the 3% and going forward. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the carrier of the amendment? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm wondering how this amendment would work for a property that has had a significant improvement. Say you had a one-story house and now it's a two-story house, and that happened in 2023. Would this roll back that, or how does that exception get dealt with?
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, would you wish to address that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As in the brief that we received on SCR 1603, and the first line says the property includes new construction or improvements that have been made. So if you made improvements to the property or it is new construction, that's based on what it is that day.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
So then my understanding is that would go back to the valuation in 2022.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, can you answer that, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, let's assume that you built a room addition on your house. Then you started with valuation in 2022. The room addition was a $50,000, let's say, addition. That would be added on to the 2022 valuation, and that would be your new valuation.
Thank you. Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if we have all the information that would be needed as to if a addition were added and there was some increase for that addition, but at the same time there was an increase because there was a significant or an overall property tax increase. I'm not sure how you would determine which part of that valuation should be added and which part should be, in this sense, subtracted because of that change. So I think the number of years and the number of changes would create a great deal of confusion to be able to adequately provide a reasonable appraised value.
Did you wish to respond to that, Senator Cali? Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, when you build an addition on your house, you get a building permit. The valuation that you put on a building permit is turned into the property valuation department, and I guarantee you they will find it and put it on your tax roll.
Questions? Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. No, I was just listening to the debate.
Thank you. Any other questions on the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't turn far enough to the right. So sorry. Senator from Butler, Senator Masterson.
That's okay, Madam Chair. Thank you. I rise in support of this amendment. And I think it is clear, right, that addition would have been, they keep that in PVD anyway, right? That house has had a base value, then an addition values. What this really does, the net effect of this, which I like, is to remove the bulk of the COVID spike. Right, we saw gigantic increases in some areas. It would remove that big spike from the evaluation. This really would be pure tax relief because it would reset it at that new value. So I'm rising in support of the amendment.
Any other questions?
Chair.
Chair recognizes the senator from Finney, Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wondered if the senator from Cali would have any idea of the fiscal note on this amendment.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Basically, there is no fiscal note on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not, you may move your amendment.
Madam Chair, I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. We are back on the bill. Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you. I guess
Any
I can
other
close.
body, do you have any other questions for the carrier of the bill? Senator from Shawnee, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this bill because I know that all of us during this last cycle heard the demand for property tax relief. from our voters. And I'm very happy that this amendment passed, because that was my one criticism of 1603, that it flattened the curve but didn't actually provide property tax relief, doesn't lower your bills compared to 2025, compared to 2024. The senator from Cali's amendment does that, and that's why I'm supporting 1603. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Klemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions, a few comments, please. So I rise in support of Senate Resolution 1603. It's a critical measure that directly addresses the concerns raised by Kansas residents regarding skyrocketing property valuations and the resulting increase in property taxes. By limiting the annual growth of taxable value for real property by 3%, this resolution provides long overdue relief to property owners who have borne the brunt of the inequitable system. The resolution promotes fairness and transparency. In our world, we tax on what we own, we tax on what we earn, and we tax on what we spend. We should steer away from taxing unrealized gains as a result on our homes. This unfairly penalizes the majority of Kansans who are homeowners and renters. During the recent contentious election cycle, it was abundantly clear at the doors that voters were hurting due to uncontrolled property taxes, property tax burdens driven out of control valuations. This resolution reflects the conscious decision by Kansans to elect members who understood that pain. I'd venture to say all or nearly all of us heard at the doors this type of pain that was being felt. For those of us who have received strong opinions from our local county government or municipalities, I appreciate and value their input. However, on this topic, I would be inclined to remind them of the recent statements this session from the Kansas Association of Counties. We strongly support open government. From the League of Kansas Municipalities, good government operates in the light of day. How true those statements are. I would think those comments would traverse across all issues that they represent. Other groups have indicated that this decision could fairly raise mills in different categories. I would argue this creates the fairest way to manage local budgets. Local governments in the state have long benefited from unchecked increases in residential property taxes, often without adequate visibility for taxpayers. This resolution shines a much-needed light on budget decisions. Will the mills increase? Potentially. However, our local officials were elected by the same folks that elected us. I'm not sure we should be playing in their sandbox other than to increase transparency. I'm not saying their decisions will not drive us at some point to curb their behavior, but I'm hopeful this transparency will drive accountability. If Kansans like or dislike the direction, we should encourage them to show their opinion at the ballot box. Finally, adopting Senate Resolution 1603 is a responsible step forward towards fiscal stewardship. Kansas voters demanded action on this issue. They deserve meaningful reform. That action begins with Senate support and passage of SCR 1603. I urge for bipartisan support on Senate Resolution 1603. Thank you, ma'am.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The senator from Leavenworth brought up a lot of great points. I agree 100%. Just want to add a couple items. Number one, this is necessary because we have unelected appraisers that are doing the dirty work. They are the ones who are raising the property tax values, and then the local taxing authorities can claim that they didn't raise your taxes, and they just let the appraisers do the hard work there by raising those appraisals out of control. They are unelected, they're faceless. We don't know who these appraisers are most of the time. And in our county, in Johnson County, the big problem for us is that these appraisals have gone up and up and up. You try to put in some kind of an appeal, and the whole system becomes a joke. Most of the time you're denied. Even when you are successful, it's not but a fraction of the appraisal, then it goes up the next year. So in this case, as the senator from Leavenworth mentioned, this is transparency and accountability.
the elected officials, if they need the money, all they have to do is justify it to the taxpayer and raise the mill levy. And then the taxpayer has the opportunity to either agree with them and vote for them next time or vote them out if they think that they're not doing their job correctly. The other thing is with these property tax increases, it is an impediment not only for the older folks who are being kicked out of their homes because they can't afford, and I've talked to a number of those. This was the number one subject on the campaign trail, but also it's an impediment to young people who want to get into a home. And if the property tax is so high, young people have a hard time coming up with a down payment for a home, at least enough to meet the mortgage requirements. And so not only do they have to pay these high property taxes, which they incorporate into the mortgage, but it makes it so they have to also take out mortgage insurance. And it just becomes an impediment because the cost of owning or buying a new home becomes very, very high. So this will provide at least some ability for people to plan for their taxes in the future. We are not going to tax on an unrealized gain, which I think everybody thinks is a bad idea. And I do think that although it would be good to control everything in terms of just one variable, this at least gives us some assurance that we're trying to do the best we can on property tax and hopefully send a signal to our local taxing authorities that people are upset. It's time for some relief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I don't know who stood up first because I'm looking this direction.
Madam Chair, I'll yield.
Okay. Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, let me apologize. I originally wasn't planning on introducing my amendment, but I have since rethought that decision, and so I have an amendment. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to share it yesterday in caucus due to time limitations, so I will share it here.
Has it been turned in?
It has been turned in.
Do you have a number?
I do. It is 1147.
Do you want to explain your amendment, or do you want the reader to read it? And if you're going to explain it, will you wait a moment till we get it passed out?
Certainly, I'll be happy to explain it, Madam.
Are you going to explain it?
Sure.
Give us just a second. Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens, you could explain now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So let me start, before I start explaining this amendment, by simply stating that this constitutional amendment does nothing to reduce property taxes. Those are the facts. So with that, I have entered an amendment, and what my amendment would do is say that each year, the approval by a majority of the qualified electors of a taxing entity voting in an election called and held thereon shall be required for the governing body of any taxing entity to increase the total amount of property tax levied by more than the annual rate of inflation as reflected by the Consumer Price Index. Simply put, my amendment actually reduces taxes going forward by stating that any taxing entity that wishes to raise and receive taxes in excess of the rate of inflation will then have to go to a vote of the people. And I will stand for questions.
Body, questions of the carrier of the amendment. Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I will ask the good carrier of the amendment if he would stand for questions.
He's standing.
Happy to do so.
I appreciate it. So this is interesting because the reason we are doing a constitutional amendment on the value limit is because it has to be. It's not by choice. So would the good senator ask why he is bringing something that can be done through statute and does not require a constitutional amendment?
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens, do you care to answer that?
Certainly, I would say that I'm bringing it as a constitutional amendment because we have not been given adequate time to vet any and all ideas as they relate to property taxes. And here we are voting on a change to our Constitution. And so if we're going to change our Constitution to ensure that we control property taxes, we need to ensure that's exactly what we are doing going forward.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So a couple of statements has been made, and it said that, first off, the carrier said that the SCR doesn't do anything to help control property taxes. Well, that's not quite accurate because it does limit the taxable increase to 3% a year. And many of us have a 30-year look back on the data. We've seen double-digit increases for residential for many years. For agriculture, in the teens, they were 17%, 12%. I mean, this helps all property classes, the underlying legislation. I would ask that the body, I'm not going to support this amendment. I said that I would support a bill introduction with this language, and we would have a hearing on it. And that bill has not been introduced yet, and I will be more than glad to have a hearing on it. But to put it in this amendment without being vetted, I think that's a dangerous game at this point. And another thing I would point out to the body is the SCR does allow local control and allows them to increase their mill levies. This amendment would play with the local control issue of the SCR. We are, like the good senator from Leavenworth said, we are trying to create transparency with this SCR, and we are trying to create, if you think about the property tax equation, the very first variable in that equation is the valuation from your county appraiser. That's the very first equation. So by limiting that first variable to a 3% increase, you are impacting property taxes in the out years. We've seen the numbers, we know it for a fact. So I'd leave it up. I am going to vote no on this amendment, and I hope that the body does not entertain it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens, do you wish to respond to that?
Sure, I would be more than happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair. You're right, this constitutional amendment absolutely affects the appraised value, but it does not keep any taxing entity from continuing to raise your taxes at the exact same rate that they have been raised in the past. This amendment will do so, and if they exceed a certain value mark, which, by the way, from the last 10 years, inflation has increased 31.1%, while taxes, the cheapest I could find in Harvey County, increased 64%, up to 108%. Simply put, this actually reduces taxes because it will allow it to go to a vote of the people, and if the people approve of the increase in excess of inflation, then fantastic. But if they do not, then they are only increasing the property taxes levied by the amount of inflation. Thank you.
Senator from Jackson, Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the good senator from Harvey County. So I think consumer price index, or that inflation number, is released monthly or at least quarterly. So how would the good senator envision that CPI number being calculated, and who would calculate that? Thank you.
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens, please respond.
Great question. That's about 6 lines down in that second paragraph. It says, as reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the United States Department of Labor or its successor. So we would base it off of the U.S. federal inflation number.
Senator from Jackson, Senator Bowser.
So just so I understand, they're going to release like 12 CPI numbers, and then we'll take some average of those 12 annually, and that would be the number.
Senator, would you face the chair, please? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That is a fair question. So looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, they do an annual rate, so they do that calculation for us. CPI is calculated monthly, but then they do an annual average, which is what we would use.
Are there any other questions for the carrier of the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry. I need to turn to my right a little bit more sharply, don't I? Senator from Cherokee, Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a couple of questions to carry the amendment. First of all, let me state this would be a tax lid. For those of us who've been around, this is a tax lid that would be put in the Constitution. So if your cities and counties didn't like the underlying bill, wow, they're not going to like this one. That's not my problem, but they won't. So my question is this: if the county wants to raise over 2%, they would have to send a ballot, or they would have to have an election in the county. Is that right, for everybody to support that?
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens.
Yes, except for not the 2%. It is based on the actual inflation number. For example, last year, I believe the number was 7.6%, the year before 6%, but then a couple of years prior, it was 0.7%. So it is based on the actual inflation number. But yes, it would go to a vote of the people. If that taxing entity was a county, then yes, the members of the county would have to approve it.
Senator from Cherokee.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry to say the 2%. We'll just say whatever inflation was. So let's say the city wants to do it, but the city sets their budget in December, and the county wants to do it, but they set their budget in July. We have 2 elections, one for each taxing unit.
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens.
If they do their budgets at different times, and they're going to, which I don't necessarily believe is the case, I could stand corrected, because similar to our current truth in taxation, that statement comes out and actually has counties, cities, school districts, everything on one statement, at least in Harvey County. So I believe in my county, it's all done at the same time. But regardless, yes, if they were set at different times, then there would be different elections so that the people had a vote.
Senator from Cherokee, Senator Schallenberger.
Thank you. I think a tax lid is an interesting concept, and I'm not opposed to a tax lid. I do think this needs a little more vetting, and I understand here's the opportunity to put it in. I don't think the Constitution is the place to put this either. I agree with the carrier of the underlying bill on that. But I would encourage a bill to be introduced on this if this fails. And I would be supportive of hearing that in the tax committee if they so happens. But I think at this time it's just a little early to do a tax lid on the floor of the Senate, so I'm going to oppose it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Harvey, Senator Owens, do you wish to respond?
I do, and I would respond by saying, while we certainly cannot predict the actions of the other chamber, it is generally assumed that this is not the final product. And if this is not the final product, and we want to go in with the strongest position possible on truly giving our taxpayers a tax break, then support this amendment.
Any other questions for the carrier of the amendment? Seeing none, you may close.
I close, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Body, you heard the motion. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Noes have it. Amendment fails. I hear division called. All those in favor? There's no need for but more than one person. All those in favor of the amendment stand, please. You may sit down. All those opposed to the amendment, please stand. We had 8 in favor of the amendment, 21 opposed. The amendment fails. We are back on the bill, the resolution 1602. Are there any other questions? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question for the senator. from Lynn. I understand that the amendment that was added does address some concerns about what happens when property is sold and that valuation will not change. My question is, will this create a stark difference in property values between properties that exist in this fiscal year and properties that are newly built from this year forward?
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It will not create any more stark value. The appraisals will still be on the forms. The taxable value will have a difference. We have that situation going on now. In fact, I was on the phone last night with the former senator discussing this legislation, and she gave me a great example. In her neighborhood, there's 4 homes. They were basically spec-built homes by the builder. They're older homes. One of them remodeled. They put a new roof on, they put new windows on, new carpet in, completely redone the house so that they can sell it. Now, the other 3 in the neighborhood haven't done anything to it. They're beaten down. Their property owners are older. They have not challenged their valuations. But because their neighborhood, the house that remodeled and sold for a higher value, all 4 of those homes, their valuations increased. So the 3 homes that didn't do anything except live in their home are paying higher property taxes because their neighbor remodeled and sold their home. They're paying property taxes on unrealized gains. It doesn't make sense, the current system. So this 3% limit would help those in their home that did not remodel, did not put on an addition. They would be able to somewhat predict at least what their valuation is going to be next year. And that would help them in calculating or anticipating for their property taxes in the future.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the senator from Lynn addressed issues or gave an example that were all existing properties. So my question was, if a property is newly built in 2026 and is paying higher dollars for construction because of materials and because of inflation, will that create a stark difference between a property that was newly built in, say, 2023 from that property in built in 2027? Because it won't have any of the limitations of that 3% increase.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. All of the properties will have this 3% limit, so I'm not quite sure what the good senator's asking. It depends. Are the homes side by side? Are they in the same county? I mean, the valuation process is what it is. So your baseline for your taxable limit would be the value from 2025. If the house didn't exist, it would come on the tax rolls in 2026. And so it's a good example we heard yesterday was from the Senate president. You know, if you would have bought, well, I'll give you an example of Cisco. In the 1990s, one of my coworkers came in and said, we need to look at this stock, Cisco. It's at $0.10 a share. Well, if you would have looked at it 10 years later, it was up almost 1,000%. Well, the people that bought in later, they didn't get to buy it at $0.10 a share. They bought in when they bought in. It's the same thing with a new house. You buy in when you buy in. That's what happens with the current system.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern would be that this would mean, although it doesn't mean that just because a house is sold, that it will have a higher valuation, but it may discourage new construction because there will be such a difference in property tax values. And then a property that's destroyed by fire and needs to be replaced, will that new property will be rebuilt, and at that point, the valuation could increase dramatically. Is that correct?
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It currently does. That's how the system works currently.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that that is how the system works currently, but everyone's valuation is increased based on the increases in property value. In this case, the increases will fall on people who are buying newly constructed properties or are forced to rebuild because of a flood, because of a fire. I think that some of our appraisers and county officials are concerned about this because it will no longer give us a common set of values, but the appraised value will be more likely to be based on the age of the property when it was built than its sale price today. Thank you.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Yes, the good senator said that it would discourage new construction. I would challenge, there's over 50 states that have valuation limits or taxable valuation limits in the United States, and we don't see any decrease in construction in those states. And I mean, this is not new technology. We are not inventing the wheel here. We have looked to other states to see what to model after. A good friend of mine had bought some property, somebody that used to serve in this body down in Florida, and he says, you need to look at what Florida's doing. So I did. I looked at Florida and a few other states, and that's where we came up with this idea. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, we're not inventing the wheel here. I think this is exactly what happened in California. And while I love to visit California, that's not a place I would want to buy a house. And we've seen that people are leaving in droves. I think the senator from Harvey said this best. This is not going to address the property tax. This is putting a false narrative. And again, this is Proposition 13 from California, and I don't think we want to bring that to Kansas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, do you wish to respond?
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the good senator, but that's not accurate. This is not Prop 13. This is SCR 1603, and it would limit taxable values, but there is a 3% increase each year. I spoke to a county commissioner, called me today. He says, when are you guys getting that thing done? I said, we're debating it today on the floor. He says, well, I don't know any government that can't live within a 3% valuation increase. And this is a county commissioner asking for it. So granted, I just, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are there any other questions? The carrier. The senator from Finney, Senator
Thank you, Madam
Clifford.
Chair. Want to respond to the senator from Johnson who spoke earlier about property tax and also the senator from Leavenworth who eloquently described these unrealized gains being taxed. And I would submit, having served at the local level for quite a number of years, that dreaded local level that we speak of here, we are providing, or they now, if I might say that, are providing services for those dollars. And I would submit that in many entities where property values are increasing mightily, they are paying for enhanced services, better schools, better roads, better response from fire and EMS on down the line. So I will be a no on this bill because I think we are impeding the locals' ability to provide those services which their citizens demand.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, do you wish to respond? Okay. Any other questions? Senator from Lyon, Senator Argabright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask the good senator from Lynn. First, I'm going to make a comment. This topic has blown up my email more than any topic so far, which is interesting. Most for. But as I look at the opponent list, that's pretty overwhelming. To the good senator from Lynn, there is some concern that is being communicated from some grassroots organizations, and I guess you could probably say all of them are, to that extent, that this might shift the burden to landowners and commercial. Would the good senator from Lynn respond to that, please? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. From Lynn, Senator Tyson, respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, we did hear testimony from some ag groups. And for those of you that don't know my background, I was actually raised, my family made their living off agriculture. And my husband, my sister's here in the body with us today. She's going to regret me saying this, but she's sitting here. Her husband is one of the biggest farmers in their county, I would say in surrounding counties. I would not do anything to hurt my family, and I would not do anything to hurt you with your constituents. Yes, the local governments are allowed to increase the mill levy. This does allow local control. So the good senator from Finney, I understand where he's coming from. I do not want to hurt local governments. I absolutely believe that they should be able to govern as needed. And this legislation allows for that. The agriculture groups, with the data that they presented from the committee, at least KLA, they did a 4-year, 5-year look back. I asked them to do a 30-year look back, because if you pull up the data, if you look in 2011, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, agriculture was over 8% increases in property values in those years. And in fact, in 13 and 14, it was 12 and 17%. So they would benefit from these 3% limits in those types of years. And they think, well, they're looking at now, agriculture's in the negative. And so, yes, they would see more of an increase if this doesn't pass, it does pass, because the mill levy would increase. But they would definitely enjoy the benefit in years that they are in double-digit valuation increases. And believe me, it has occurred and it will occur again.
Any other questions for the senator from Lynn? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Implementing these property tax value limits will ensure a more fair and stable system in our communities. I'll ask that you support this legislation and not listen to the naysayers. Don't let them persuade you. Let the people persuade you. Let the taxpayers persuade you. Let the voters decide on this, because that's what we're doing today, is deciding whether the voters of Kansas get to vote on this amendment or not. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee rises in report, it report SCR 1603 favorably for adoption as amended.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. The chair recognizes the majority leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carried.
Clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Blasey, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Dietrich in the chair. Recommended SCR 1603 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be it further amended on motion of Senator Alley, and the resolution be adopted as further amended. Senate Bill 14 be passed.
Chair recognizes the senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich, to adopt the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we adopt the committee report.
You heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Report's adopted. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 197 by the Committee on Commerce, an act concerning the Star Bonds Financing Act. Senate Bill number 198 by the Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning abortion. Senate Bill number 199 by the Committee on Commerce, an act concerning fireworks, defining the fireworks sales season for seasonal retailers of the consumer fireworks, and providing for year-round sales by permanent retailers of consumer fireworks. Senate Bill number 200 by Senators Alley, Argabright, and others, an act concerning Purple Heart Awards. Senate Bill number 201 by Senator Schmidt, an act concerning property taxation. Senate Bill number 202 by Senators Shane, Joseph Clays, and others, an act concerning education. Senate Bill number 203 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning notices to appear. Senate Bill number 204 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning court records. Senate Bill number 205 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. Senate Bill number 206 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the Kansas Offender Registration Act. Senate Bill number 207 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning child care. Senate Bill number 208 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning children and minors. Senate Bill number 209 by the Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning sales taxation. Senate Bill number 210 by the Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning sales taxation. Senate Bill number 211 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning wildlife and parks. Senate Bill number 212 by Senator Sykes, an act concerning health and health care. Senate Bill number 213 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning wildlife. Senate Bill number 214 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning attorneys at law. Senate Bill number 215 by Senators Corson, Faust-Goudot, and others, an act concerning taxation. Senate Bill number 216 by Senators Corson, Holscher, and others, an act concerning labor and employment. Senate Bill number 217 by Senators Corson, Petty, and Sykes, an act concerning property taxation. Senate Bill number 218 by Senators Corson, Holscher, and others, an act concerning labor and employment. Senate Bill number 219 by Senator Sykes, an act concerning insurance. Senate Bill number 220 by Senators Sykes, Corson, and others, an act concerning children and minors. Senate Bill number 221 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the Judicial Council. Senate Bill number 222 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning state agencies. And Senate Concurrent Resolution number 1610 by Senators J.R. Clays, Alley, and others, a proposition to amend Section 4 of the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of the State of Kansas to recognize the right to bear arms as a natural and fundamental right, clarifying that such right includes the possession and use of ammo, firearm accessories, and firearm components.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 197 through Senate Bill 222 and SCR 1610. Reports of standing committees. Clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Local Government and Transparency and Ethics recommends Senate Bill 2 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Local Government, Transparency, and Ethics recommends Senate Bill 7 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends Senate Bill 23 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends Senate Bill 18 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 135 be passed and, because the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends Senate Bill 21 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Before adjourning, are there announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. In addition to the votes on general orders for final action tomorrow, we will have final action on 2 nominees by the governor, the brigadier general, and appointment to the Board of Regents, which are on page 6 of the calendar. We'll also vote on final action, 2 bills on the consent calendar, Senate Bill 8 and 9. With that, Mr. President, I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, February 6th, 20.
Before I cast that vote, I had an announcement walk in. I'm sorry, but the motion's been made, and we'll take it right after the announcement.
Please forgive the walk-in. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Very quickly, yes, Thursday is February 6th, so on your each of your desks, it says Tuesday, February 6th. It should say Thursday, February 6th. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for the announcement. The motion's on the table. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. We're adjourned.